Hello, hello. Hello, hello, everyone. Let me see here. Welcome to TJ Speaks. I am your host, TJ, and tonight's topic we will be discussing, because this is such a hot topic, we will continue to discuss the fallout from the Supreme Court decision, um, namely relating to affirmative action. Namely, we this today's topic we are discussing um, the court protections and what we have learned. Let me see here. I'm gonna change that banner. Okay, so the lessons learned from the affirmative action program mistake. Okay, my title of today's show is After 100 Years of Jim Crow Violating the American Black Citizens' Rights. The Supreme Court ruled that protecting the Black citizens is unconstitutional because the Asians are living here now. Um, that's pretty much the conclusion that I got from this latest Supreme Court ruling regarding affirmative action, and I wanted to talk about it. Um, Starting with the lessons learned from the affirmative action program. The affirmative action program, one of the main errors of that program is that the affirmative action program failed to address the Pacific ethnic group, um, the Black descendants of American slaves, um, violations, civil rights violations. It lumped all of the black people, including people that's not from America and that's newly arrived. They lumped the Asians inside of affirmative action, white women inside of the affirmative action, um, pretty much every other group. And that wasn't correct. That was not a correct thing to do, especially when America knew, especially when America knew at that time in the 60s what was going on with specifically the black citizens. The black citizens were specifically treated as a second class and many times third class citizen in these United States, irrespective of the Native Americans and the other groups. The black citizens were specifically targeted with laws such as Jim Crow and segregation. And we all know and is documented the signs of white versus colored. Um, that's one of the things I noticed when I was reviewing the Jim Crow era. I've noticed that although America had multiple ethnicity races inside of America, Jim Crow specifically named the black citizens, the black American descendant of slave citizens. I thought that was odd because we had Native American. The law never specified that Native Americans should be segregated. The law never specified that Asians should be segregated. In fact, America paid the Japanese Americans, the Japanese citizens, reparations, something that was not afforded to the descendants of American slaves, their black citizens. So it was definitely um, while I'm a part of that group, we were definitely singled out and specifically targeted, and we were fighting for our rights in the civil rights era. And when they made up this legislation and they had this court agreement, because reparations was definitely on the table. A lot of people don't discuss this, but Malcolm X and specifically Martin Luther King, he was in negotiations and discussions about reparations. All right. Now, there's kind of no wonder how Martin Luther King mysteriously ended up dead and assassinated following just before this civil rights legislation and this affirmative action bill came to pass. So it was sabotaged from the beginning. Affirmative action was attempting, the way it was written, by using the word minority and not the black citizens and not the descendants of American slaves. Um, the language of the law was written as sabotage because America did not do this to everyone. And they knew it, but they wanted to, and it's clear now with this affirmative action case that America sought out to bring in an immigrant class to try and weaponize that class of newly arrived immigrants against the black descendants of slaves. The you know Using the Asian argument, which is basically a white supremacy argument in the affirmative action case, using it was a white supremacist argument, and so that it assumed the entire affirmative action lawsuit, the lawsuit that challenged affirmative action and college admissions, was completely supremacist. It assumed that Asians and whites, which it has named in the court filings of the Supreme Court, that Asians and whites were superior intellectually. It's constantly implicated in the entire um, lawsuit, the entire case. It was assumed that blacks were intellectually inferior based off a high school level college entrance exam such as the SAT. One singular exam was used to justify not admitting an entire race of people. And the Asians and whites were assumed to be superior on that singular high school level SAT exam. The course never recognized the other categories, which Harvard had testified to, that you need more than a singular test score to get into Harvard. It's about six categories that Harvard scores each candidate on, and this is irrespective of race. And it's only until they get down to the admitting class, all of the students that pass the board to be accepted, and then they have cuts. And so the the ones that make it to the once you accept it, you get assigned to the cuts. Those students that are potential cuts from the team are then uh, considered there's four other categories, four pluses, and that's when race could be considered for that candidate, based on whether or not that candidate was in a minority group. And in addition to that, it was pluses are assigned due to legacies. Pluses are assigned through to poverty. If you are poor, plus is also assigned to athletes. So there's race was never a singular category in which another student can just simply top another student simply on that one category of race, and there was no other categories around. It was not a singular category. When it comes to the chopping block, they chop students based on the tier level that they were assigned to, and that's based on their score level. So if it's not hard to understand. The top students, all the perfect SAT score students, they're assigned to the tier one, or the And all the straight A students, they're assigned to tier one, and all the kids with straight mostly A's and a little one B, they're assigned to tier two, and the kids that have half A's and half B's are assigned to tier three. And Harvard also accepts students in the high B's that has mostly B's and maybe one or two A's. They're assigned to a tier four. So you compete according to your tier that you are placed in. And then each tier has cuts. So, and the students with the lowest scores of those tiers, they are on the chopping block. All right. And like I said, there are 6 categories, not just an SAT score to be considered, not just academics. SAT and GPA is only one category at Harvard. There's 5 other categories that's in addition to academics. But that was completely ignored because of this lawsuit was completely racist. It singled out the black students as the only minority group, which wasn't true. The Asians were also receiving pluses as a minority group from Harvard. But that was also ignored in this lawsuit with the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did not or failed to ask questions whether or not Asians were, in fact, indeed receiving a plus due to their race. So, along with white women who also received a plus, all right, as a minority group. So, there was a lot of issues with it, and we now know moving forward that we need to be more specific, especially for the descendants. We need protections. There is definitely a need for the protection for the descendants of American slaves, the people that was actually harmed by the actions as citizens in these United States. And that's where affirmative action failed. Affirmative action failed to address the people that it was specifically supposed to protect. And I believe we learned our lesson. All right. Let's see here. So now we are moving forward. And another thing that I have to address is the fact that an issue with the Supreme Court ruling was court protections for citizens were seen, even though the black or race, the word race was not specific. The word minority was not specific enough, although, albeit that, once a group of citizens is awarded or legislation or protections are intended for the protection of American citizens, it is imperative for American citizens to receive those court protections. And those court protections should never be redefined as preferential treatment. And that's the biggest lesson that I've learned moving forward from this affirmative action case, is that the threat is out there that, once you are aggrieved and you seek court intervention and that court approves a protection package for your Pacific group, that we have to ensure that the court will never ever go again and turn around and remove the protections that was intended for citizens and turn it and redefine it as preferential treatment. That is a big threat, and that is something that we need to focus on. Courts should never redefine protections as preferential treatment. That was a first. That was new. That was unique because the Supreme Court knew that Harvard and the other institution, UNC, and they knew that affirmative action was intended for the protection of the black citizens. But the way they worded it was as if, and everyone was discussing as if it was some sort of preferential treatment, knowing that America has wronged its citizens. They know that. But I thought that was very interesting, and that's what I decided to do today's show real quick. you know, um, Let me see here. I just wanted to touch on that. That was the main part of my show, of today's show, is discussing courts redefining protection as preferential treatment, and we must protect our citizen rights and protections in this country. Okay, we must protect that because, as you see, that America will give you something and take it away, give you protections in one breath, and then take it away in another breath. All right. So moving forward, we must prepare for our reparations. All right, because the reparations is happening. The reparation movement is moving forward. Okay, it's moving forward. See here. God damn it. These alarms are annoying. All right. So the descendants of American slaves prepare for reparations. And let's learning from this affirmative action case, we must pay attention to the language. Now that we know, we're going to be more on point to paying attention to the language that's in the legislation or the reparation package that it will be drafted. Um, America has never paid its debt to the descendants of American slaves, and America's not sorry for slavery and Jim Crow. But it's up to us to make sure they're sorry and to ensure our rights, and we can do that. We have every right to do that in this country. You know, in conclusion, those are my thoughts, and I'm gonna leave you with this. My last thought, to reiterate my whole point of today's broadcast, is that after 100 years of Jim Crow violating America's black citizens' rights, the Supreme Court ruled that protecting black citizens is unconstitutional, which is crazy. How can a protection for black citizens be viewed as preferential treatment? We need to pay attention to what the Supreme Court is trying to, they're playing both sides right now. So the Supreme Court is aware affirmative action was intended for protecting the black citizens. They are aware of the right violations under the Equal Protection Clause against the black citizens. But at the same time, 40 years after affirmative action was drafted and approved by the Supreme Court, they will turn around and and call and rename protections as preferential treatment, and we must be prepared because we can never let this happen again. We will not allow the Supreme Court to put limits on protections of black citizens as well, assuming that black citizens are only entitled to a limited amount or a limited time of protection. And I was proposed recently, I was asked by another fellow white citizen how much time is needed to aggrieve the crimes against the black citizens. And my answer to that person is, as long as the Constitution is around, as long as the Constitution is valid, that's the time. That's the expiration date. The expiration for black citizens, civil rights, and protections expire when the Constitution expires. That's our answer. You looking for an expiration date? It expires when the Constitution expires. That's your date. Because no country should promise and commit to protect their citizens, and then when it comes to black citizens, they need a time limit. Our protections have the same time limit as the Constitution. Okay? Our protections have the same time limit. I'm going to document that. As long as that U.S. Constitution is valid and is around and it stands, that's when our protection is in place. Okay? That's when our protection is in place. Because you don't ask that question of any other race. You know, ask the question if Native Americans have a limit, time limit for their reservations. If the Asian hate crime bill has a time limit, but when it comes to the descendants of slaves, you need a time limit. Think about it. That's pretty darn racist. But they are not aware of their ignorance because racism is a disease. It's a disease of the mind, and it constantly needs treatment, just like a mental illness. So yes, we plan on staying in America and receiving our civil rights, receiving our constitutional rights for as long as America stands. That's when our rights expire. When America expires, then our rights expire. Okay? Capiche? All right, guys. Have a wonderful day. I'll check you later. Bye.